Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're ditching the standard high school summary of Homer's Odyssey to take a much closer, fresher look at this foundational text. We're going to ask a surprisingly modern question. Is history's greatest hero, Odysseus, actually just an unreliable narrator desperately trying to justify his own dominance?
I mean, it's a wild thought, right? We all know the classic setup, the lone, rugged Greek warrior fighting terrifying monsters and angering gods just to get back home to his family. But when you really scratch the surface and re-examine the power dynamics, the incredibly strict gender roles, and those marginalized voices hidden in the margins of the text, well, the heroic myth starts to crack. A completely different, much darker narrative emerges that totally flips our understanding of what actually makes someone a hero.
To unpack all this, here is our agenda. First, gods, mortals, and patriarchy. Next, the threat of autonomous women. Third, taming the femme fatale. Fourth, Penelope, the ideal wife. And finally, who controls the narrative. We're going to journey from the divine rulers on Olympus straight down to the silenced women on Earth. Let's dive in.
Okay, Section 1. Gods, mortals, and patriarchy. Establishing the world.
So as you probably know, the epic is divided into three distinct parts: the telemachy, the wanderings, and the return. But this structure isn't just a geographical roadmap. You see, Odysseus isn't merely trying to find his front door. He's on a highly calculated, desperate quest to reclaim his patriarchal title as the king of Ithaca. He has to restore order to a society that's completely unraveling under those arrogant suitors while he's been away.
And look at the divine forces pulling the strings here. It's fascinating. On one hand, you've got Athena, the goddess of wisdom, acting basically as his personal divine PR agent, actively securing his future. But then you have Poseidon, who acts as a totally spiteful antagonist. And Poseidon isn't just tossing ships around for the fun of it. He's actively punishing Odysseus for his toxic pride after Odysseus blinds his son, the Cyclops. These gods establish the absolute rules and consequences in this universe.
But to really get what's happening on the ground, we have to talk about the patriarchy in Homeric Greece. This isn't just some background scenery. It is the entire societal structure Odysseus is fighting to restore. It dictates incredibly rigid behavioral limits. Men hold the power, women hold the household, and if absolutely anyone, mortal or divine, steps outside those bounds, the world violently pushes back.
Which brings us to Section 2, the threat of autonomous women, divine double standards.
There's this fantastic critical analysis by scholar Pei Xuan Chia from Simon Fraser University that totally shifts the perspective here. Once you look through this lens, you realize Odysseus isn't actually just fighting literal sea monsters and giants on his journey. Metaphorically, the guy is conquering direct threats to the patriarchy itself. And honestly, nothing hits the nail on the head quite like Calypso. When Zeus orders her to let Odysseus go, she absolutely goes off on the male gods. She shouts, "You unrivaled lords of jealousy, scandalized when goddesses sleep with mortals." She is calling out the massive hypocrisy right there. Male gods are totally celebrated for their sensuality, but the second women assert theirs, they're punished and forced back into subjugation.
Because dissenting women, think of Circe or the Sirens, they are immense threats in this world. They don't play by the rules. They live as solitary, incredibly powerful figures who completely subvert this whole idea of domestic bliss. And the threat isn't just physical, right? By operating completely outside of male authority, they threaten masculine dominance. The Sirens, with their alluring songs, literally threaten to usurp his narrative power, his kleos or eternal glory, which would utterly destroy Odysseus' status as a hero.
So, how does the hero deal with this? Section 3. Taming the femme fatale. Containing the threat.
Let's look at the sorceress Circe. She starts off holding absolute power on her island, literally turning Odysseus' men into pigs, which, let's be real, is a pretty on-the-nose metaphor for how she views them. But then the god Hermes steps in. He advises Odysseus to force an oath from Circe to prevent being unmanned in her bedroom. So Odysseus, driven by this deep-seated patriarchal fear of having his masculinity usurped, completely neutralizes her. By the time he's done, this fiercely autonomous sorceress has been transformed into a proper, submissive Homeric hostess, literally bathing and feeding his men.
There's a great quote from academic Lillian Eileen Doherty that sums this dynamic up perfectly. She points out that in the epic, seduction is primarily framed as a threat that the hero absolutely has to deflect and manipulate. Marginalized femininity is reduced to a literal roadblock. The hero has to manipulate these women not because they are inherently evil, but simply to maintain his own dominance.
Now let's flip the script. Section 4. Penelope,
the ideal wife, navigating societal expectations.
When you look at visual analysis of ancient Greek art by Jennifer Niels, the juxtaposition is mind-blowing. These evil, autonomous women, like Circe, are routinely painted bare-breasted, uncivilized, and just wandering around freely. But Penelope, the good woman, she is always shown fully draped, physically restrained, and sitting securely inside her house. Her entire visual identity is tied to her physical containment.
And her confinement goes way beyond just staying indoors, right? Even though she possesses the exact same calculating, strategic cunning as her husband, like unraveling her web every single night to trick the suitors, her power is so incredibly restricted. She's defined entirely by her marital status. And get this, the patriarchal order is actually enforced by her own teenage son, Telemachus. He explicitly reminds his own mother that he holds the reins of power in the house, actively silencing her. No matter how brilliant she is fundamentally unable to exceed her position as just a wife.
Which leads us to our final point. Section 5. Who controls the narrative? The unreliable narrator.
This is the absolute kicker. Think about how this story is actually told. By the time we even meet Circe, Odysseus is recounting his wanderings to King Alcinous's court. He is the sole narrator. Talk about a conflict of interest, right? He is highly motivated to make himself look like a legend. He actively skews the descriptions, positioning female sexuality and power as malicious obstacles. We really have to view him as an unreliable narrator who purposefully frames female autonomy as villainous just to justify his own dominance to his royal audience.
But here is what's truly amazing. Even inside this heavily biased, hero-centric PR campaign, Homer actually leaves us these little breadcrumbs of female dissent. Think about Calypso totally calling out the gods' hypocrisy, or Penelope's quiet, enduring brilliance. Homer is quietly challenging the constraints of his own society. He might not be overtly advocating for liberated women, but he ensures their dissent is permanently recorded in the text, completely changing how we can read these ancient myths today.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. If the patriarchy is writing the mythos, and a highly flawed hero is the one controlling the narrative, what untold stories of these incredible women have simply been erased by history? It completely changes how you read the epic, and it invites us to imagine the agency these women could have had. Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep analyzing and always keep asking questions about the stories we've been told.